Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight: the Taliban have threatened to attack U.S. troops in Afghanistan in the wake of a missed deadline for complete withdrawal from the country. May 1st was the deadline for a deal hammered out by the Taliban and former United States President Donald Trump. The U.S. had agreed to a full withdrawal of its troops from Afghanistan. In exchange, the Taliban had said it would not attack US and coalition forces. It had largely avoided attacking US and coalition forces. However, violence against Afghan military personnel and civilians had continued. Last month, President Joe Biden moved the deadline for full withdrawal back to September 11. Under Biden's plan, May 1st is only the start of the withdrawal. The US is also sending more troops to Afghanistan to protect retreating forces. As a deadly surge of COVID-19 rips through India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi loses a key state election. Mamata Banerjee was elected chief of West Bengal for the third time after her Trinamool congressional party won a two-thirds majority. This makes Banerjee India's only female chief minister. Election Commission officers say her party took more than 200 seats in the 294-seat state assembly. Most of the votes were cast in March. However, polling in some constituency continued through April. This was just as India had started a deadly surge of daily coronavirus infections. But Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party still made significant gains. It is West Bengal's main opposition party. Modi had been criticized for focusing on the elections instead of making the pandemic his top priority. The Federal Election Commission had also been blamed for rising COVID numbers by permitting rallies and voting in which large crowds did not wear masks or maintain social distancing. The election results are being seen as a test of the impact the pandemic's second wave is having on support for Modi and his right wing BJP. India reached more than 400,000 COVID cases for the first time on Saturday, along with a record high number of deaths on Sunday. But the real number of cases are feared to be underreported. Days after it banned flights from India, Malaysia has found its first case of the highly infectious B1617 variant of COVID from India. Malaysia's Health Minister Adam Baba said the variant was found in an Indian national who was screened at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The discovery comes as the country faces a spike in new COVID cases. It's not the first time a variant has come in from outside the country. Baba said 48 cases of the South African variant, 8 cases of the UK variety, and 2 of the Nigerian have also been recorded in the country. However, the World Health Organization has described the variant from India as a variant of interest. This means it may have mutations that could make the virus more transmissible, cause more severe disease, or evade vaccine immunity. In February, Malaysia launched a nationwide COVID-19 vaccination program. It is aiming to vaccinate 80% of its 32 million people in the next year. On Sunday, the country reported over 3,000 new cases of COVID. This brings its total number of infections to 415,012 cases. This includes over 1,500 deaths. Despite facing ongoing discrimination, Indian Muslims have stepped forward to help bury their neighbors of all faiths who are dying from COVID. In the Indian state of Maharashtra, Moin Mastan and his team of 25 volunteers have been working around the clock. They perform the last rites, cremations, and burials of 40 to 50 Indians daily who are dying of COVID. They're doing this while fasting in Ramadan and sometimes break their fast at the end of the day as they cremate the dead. Since January, they have laid to rest over 3,500 bodies. According to government reports, as of April 27th, over 63,000 people have died of COVID in Maharashtra alone. Mastan's team has been collecting private funds to pay for the ambulances that take the dead to cremation centers and graveyards. Both of these have been overwhelmed not just by the number of deceased, but also because burials and cremations must be performed within 24 hours of death. In addition, Mastan and his team called the families on video calls to show them the last rite ceremonies. Many families of COVID victims who were in contact with their patients are required to quarantine and could not attend the burial. The government of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi last year blamed Muslims for spreading COVID after a Muslim gathering of 3,000 took place. Authorities detained dozens of tourists who attended and had come with valid travel documents. Organizers were also charged. Indian media blamed it on Corona Jihad. This sparked a backlash against Muslims, accusing them of spreading the virus. But no such incitement by Indian government or media has been seen in the wake of India's latest deadly surge. Many say this was spread by the Hindu Kumbh Mela festival, as well as political rallies Modi held for state elections. Both of these events were attended by millions who neither masked nor social distanced. India is logging over 300,000 positive cases nationally and more than 200,500 deaths daily. However, experts say the real infection rates must be several times higher. On a sweeter note, 68% of Americans think their mom is a cool mom. With the Hallmark holiday, Mother's Day, coming up this Sunday, a new poll shows that a majority of Americans think very highly of their mothers. 68% of Americans said that they think their mother is, quote unquote, the cool mom. Among them, 62% said it was because she talked with her kids openly about anything and everything. Over half said it was because she let them get away with things a normal mom would not when they were growing up. The poll was conducted by One Poll on behalf of Angara.com, a fine gemstone business. The survey also asked respondents what were the most important lessons they learned from their mothers over the years. Nearly 7 in 10 respondents said that they learned how to juggle responsibilities from watching their mothers do it all over the years. Over 60% said that their mothers have been juggling more in the past year than ever before. Will she be the next AOC? Egyptian American Rana Abdulhamid announced her run against incumbent Democratic Congresswoman Caroline Maloney to represent New York's 12th congressional district in April. The area is made up of significant portion of Manhattan's East Side, Astoria, and North Brooklyn. Abdulhamid grew up in the neighborhood. If she's elected, Abdulhamid would be the youngest member to ever serve in Congress. She would also be the third Muslim woman ever elected to the House. Abdulhamid has already received the endorsement of Justice Democrats. This is a progressive activist group that was instrumental in the victories of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jamal Bowman in their New York primary elections. Justice Democrats hope Abdulhamid will beat long-established Democrats such as AOC and Bowman did. They also hope she will help further the progressive agenda that has pulled the party further left in New York and nationally. Some Muslims worry about her ties to CVE. You can cut that out, but I think it's important to mention. But you can cut that out. Ramadan is also about service. Muslims in one Boston suburb are spearheading a food drive in Ramadan with the help of all the area's public schools, a church, and a synagogue. Milton's Muslim Neighbors is seeking donations of non-perishable food, dry goods, and hygiene items for those in need. These will be distributed by Interfaith Social Services in Quincy, Massachusetts. The drive runs through May 10th. The group's founder, Tahra Goroya, said that Ramadan is a time to celebrate the many blessings we have through acts of charity. The drive has donation bins in the lobbies of all Milton public schools, as well as local synagogues and the lot of a church. New Jersey is going to see cops in hijab. Female Muslim police officers in Newark, New Jersey will now be able to wear hijab as part of their uniform. The city's public safety director, Brian O'Hara, said the change was made after an officer requested permission to wear her hijab on duty. The Newark Police Department is made up of 34% Black officers, 45% Hispanic officers, and 21% white officers. Of the entire force, 22% are women. In 2000, the U.S. Justice Department filed a religious discrimination suit against the department. This was on behalf of two Muslim officers who were threatened with dismissal because they did not shave their beards for religious reasons. This time, Newark's police department agreed to change the rules after a request was made. Muslim police officers had been asked to inform their commanding officer that they intend to wear hijab while on duty. Nationwide, other police departments have also allowed hijab to be part of the uniform, including New York City, Washington, D.C., and Nashville, Tennessee. Former United States Vice President Mike Pence is getting ready to re-enter politics. In his first public address since leaving office in January, Pence spoke before hundreds of evangelical conservatives at the Palmetto Family Council's annual gala in Columbia, South Carolina on Thursday. He said he will use the coming months to push back on the liberal agenda, which he said is wrong for the nation. Pence also said that he would be challenging U.S. President Joe Biden's avalanche of liberal policies as he increases speaking engagements across the country. Pence's choice of South Carolina for his first public address has a political background. It holds the first presidential primaries in the South, with candidates of both major parties normally spending over a year in the state before those votes. The aim is to introduce themselves and gain support. Police fired 24 shots on a handcuffed man. Our next story looks at why didn't they turn on their body cameras. Amongst police shootings on a daily basis, the role of body cameras on officers is being called for assessment. Ariane Mccree was shot dead by police in a Walmart parking lot in Chester, South Carolina in November 2019. This was after he had been handcuffed and accused of stealing a $45 lock. But the events leading to his death were unclear, partly because of responding officers did not activate their body cameras until after Mccree was killed in a hail of police bullets. Body cameras have been used to enhance police transparency and provide key information in incidents that involve use of force. In over 12,000 local police departments around the country, about half have body cameras. But these are not always used properly. Experts say police departments need to teach officers to follow rules when using them. The New Orleans Police Department installed new policies and procedures, including guidelines on the use of body cameras, over 5 years ago. According to Baltimore Police Commissioner Danny Murphy, who oversaw the process, this led to a sharp increase in officers following proper body camera procedures. He said as a result, use of force complaints plunged by 60% between 2014 and 2018. Canada has become one of the first countries to formally acknowledge Islamophobia. It has dedicated a national day to fight it. More details by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
Canada has announced that January the 29th will be a National Day of Remembrance for the 2017 Quebec City Mosque Massacre. In this attack, 6 Muslims were killed and 5 others seriously injured. The countrywide National Day honors the victims and expresses solidarity with those survivors. The Ministry of Canadian Heritage said that the day will also be used to promote action against Islamophobia. The statement said that Islamophobia is a concrete and daily reality for Muslim communities everywhere. The Canadian government intends to introduce new regulations to require online platforms to remove illegal and hateful content. This move was greatly welcomed by Muslim communities everywhere across Canada.
3D printing continues to grow. A Dutch couple now have become the new tenants of the first house of its kind in the Netherlands. Let's watch this fascinating report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
Retired shopkeepers Elise Lutz and Harry Deckers are now the tenants of the first ever 3D printed house in the Netherlands. They received their digital key for the 2-bedroom concrete bungalow. The digital key is also an app allowing them to open the front door.
Oh, de boom. Kijk, Harry de Beuk.
Ja, prachtig.
Oh, supermooi.
Mooi uitzicht.
Vind ik mooi.
Ja, prachtig.
Ja, ik vind dat juist mooi. Een oneffenheid. Het is net alsof hij hier even gestotterd heeft toen hij verder is gegaan. Ja, het is echt mooi. Het voelt echt heel goed. Ik vind de kleur ook prachtig. Binnen is de kleur echt puur. Ja, goed.
The new house was printed in 24 parts in a nearby factory. It was then assembled on the actual site. The single-story home has more than 1,000 square feet of floor area, with a spacious living room and 2 bedrooms. The couple pays €800 a month, and their 6-month contract starts from August the 1st. Grooves, where the printer shuttled back and forth, can be seen on the walls of the 94 square meter building. Designers say the house fully complies with Dutch building standards and that the building will become more sophisticated as they grow from the knowledge gained.
After these reports, we have coming up next our in-depth analysis segment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
So it's nothing extraordinary what we do. It's just a human to human, like brothers to brothers and sisters to sisters. Nothing else, nothing more.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, walking up and down the world's largest refugee camps. I met Sister Fatima. Well, I'm calling her a sister. She was just a teenage girl, my granddaughter's age. Her parents were slaughtered by the Burmese military, and she was dragged by the Burmese soldiers to their hut, and all night long she was violated. She lost consciousness. When she regained, and in the morning and soldiers were themselves away, she ran and hid in a vegetable patch. Some people saw her, gave her clothes, and took her 4-day-long walk to Bangladesh. Who will speak up for her? Who will stand up for her if not you and I? It's our responsibility. It's our duty, brothers and sisters in humanity. And that's why I like you to support Burma Task Force. I'm a volunteer for it. But Burma Task Force is standing up to stop this genocide, violation of our sisters. You and I are free, they are not. Please stand up, work with Burma Task Force, and donate today to Burma Task Force. Together, we can do it. Assalamu alaikum.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
An estimated 3 million Uyghurs have been detained in concentration camps, separated from their loved ones. Some have escaped, but had to leave family members behind. During a brief window of opportunity in 2016, they left China, thinking they would arrange paperwork and reunite their families. But the window slammed shut, and now many mothers and fathers have no idea where their children are today or who is taking care of them. Saleh Farouk is in conversation with a journalist who reported the stories of these missing Uyghur children. Over to you, Saleha.
Thank you so much, Hena. I do appreciate that. Today, we're here speaking with a journalist and author by the name of Tasneem Nazir, who is with us today based on a recent article that she had published in The Diplomat online newspaper. Tasneem, thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Sister, for having me.
Now, I just wanted to explore a little bit about the subject matter of the article. Of course, you wrote about ethnic Uyghurs, who are, of course, at this time experiencing various crimes against humanity, genocide. But of course, a little known topic is the idea of family separation, which is unfortunately becoming quite a major issue over there for both the Uyghurs that are in East Turkestan, as well as those that are currently displaced. So for now, I wanted to just begin with our first question with, when it comes to these so-called crimes against humanity occurring against Uyghurs in East Turkestan, as well as, of course, Turkic ethnic minorities in the same region. Most people, as I said, are familiar with the other actions being undertaken by China. And of course, we're referring to the ongoing forced labor schemes, mass surveillance, arbitrary detention, and so on. I cannot even name the current gender-based violence actions that recently came to light. But can you please describe to us, especially based on the article that you recently published, under which circumstances are Uyghur families separated from their children, and what does that look like in this day and age, and going back to when the crisis first started?
Well, there's many Uyghur Muslims who have fled Xinjiang. Some of them were traveling to Turkey and decided that they wanted to escape the crackdown against Muslims in the country, but unfortunately, due to restrictions on getting passports for their children, they had to keep some of their children back in East Turkestan. And sadly, when they did try to get their children back from East Turkestan, China had already put whoever their guardians were that they had left their children with into concentration camps and sent their children to either orphanages or unknown locations, so they lost contact with their children. Now, some of the mothers that I've spoken to have actually seen their children stripped of their Muslim identity and being put into these orphanages. Some of them have been seen crying on a Chinese version of YouTube, and others have been seen just kind of really taking up the Chinese identity and letting go of any form of identification of their Muslim identity. They're not even allowed to say their Uyghur names to any kind of state media. They have to take on these new Chinese names, which has been really heartbreaking for many mothers who, if it wasn't for their shahada and their faith in God, their faith in Allah, they would have actually committed suicide. This is how severe the situation has become for Uyghur Muslims in the country.
Wow, that's definitely events that break all of our hearts collectively. And I think that a lot of what you described as evidence is being used by various parliaments around the world, such as the British Parliament and recently the Canadian Parliament, in declaring such crimes amounting to genocide, or this idea of ethnic cleansing. So when we think about population control measures in that regard, also various statistics from China do reveal to us, as you must know, that the idea of a severely decreasing birth rates in Xinjiang, especially during this mass crackdown on Uyghurs, as you're describing. Now, China's one-child policy was initially, as most people know, completely abolished in 2016. But it seems that these Chinese authorities are more keen on applying these population control measures on Uyghur Muslims, especially. So, how does such actions speak to China's overall discriminatory attitude towards Uyghur families, in the sense that they're applying this indiscriminate advance to only suppress Uyghur populations, whereas Han Chinese are most likely not subject to such treatment? If you could talk a little bit about that and the correlation there.
Yes, well, there's definitely a correlation in that respect, because there's many Uyghur Muslims who have been stopped from having more children. There's many Uyghur parents in East Turkestan who've actually had to hide the number of children, because they know that if the Chinese authorities found out that they had more than one child, they would be reprimanded by the law or even taken into a concentration camp just for that. It seems like the Chinese government are heavily cracking down and finding excuses to punish Muslim minorities in East Turkestan, and it's an extremely heartbreaking situation for many Uyghur families who, many of them have multiple children and do not want to, abort the child, which some of them have been actually forced to do. You've heard now that there are many allegations of forced sterilizations, which has come in now from many Uyghurs speaking out. And I've personally spoken to a family who had fled East Turkestan and come to the UK. And at 9 months pregnant, the sister was asked to take the baby out and to have it forcibly aborted and killed. So she fled East Turkestan and came to Turkey, and now they're in the UK. But these are just one of many instances where China is cracking down on Uyghur Muslim families and do not want them to further expand.
Okay. And later in this interview, I'll definitely move towards speaking about the individual experiences of those certain families that you have been really fortunate to speak with. But just more towards what you were saying about refugees and displaced peoples, and especially how it has to do with Uyghur Muslims. Of course, right now we know that the global refugee crisis has become very dire from all around the world, of course. And Uyghur refugees do make up a good number of people right now that have had to run away from Xinjiang, as you're describing. So, but for parents or as well as children who have had to seek asylum, outside of China, has there been hope for reconciliation with their families, whether they're currently separated within their indigenous region of East Turkestan, or whether they're outside of the country and looking for a means to get reconnected with their family members?
Well, to be honest with you, they have really appealed to the Muslim world, to the Muslim Ummah, those Muslim world leaders, to put pressure on the Chinese government to reunite them with their families and to protect the Muslim identity that's getting lost now in East Turkestan. But what's happening is, unfortunately, there have been, sadly, Uyghur Muslims who had gone to, for example, Saudi Arabia, but have been actually sent back from Saudi Arabia back to China. And so there's a lot of distrust at the moment. There's a lot of hopelessness and not really knowing who to turn to reunite, to have any kind of hope of reuniting with their loved ones. And many of the Uyghur Muslim brothers and sisters who I've spoken to have really urged me to awaken the Ummah, to really go back to our Muslim tenets and care for our Muslim brothers and sisters who are facing persecution because of their deen, because of their visible Muslim identity. And if they have any hope of reuniting, it will be purely through Muslim world leaders putting pressure on the Chinese government to stop this persecution.
It's really interesting how you bring up the idea of leadership and global powers. So in your article, when you spoke with and documented the stories of all of these multiple Uyghur women, as well as sometimes men that are dealing with the aftermath of being separated from their children, after speaking with them in such an intimate manner, is there any such legal process or resolve on their end that might be available for these parents, these mothers and fathers, to become reunited with their children? And at the same time, what's the reluctance there, especially with surrounding Muslim nations, with being able to provide that resolve or that support?
I think many of them have appealed to Muslim nations because many Uyghurs who've sought refuge in countries such as, for example, Turkey, have been working with the Turkish embassy and those in the government to try to, put pressure or, contact the Chinese government with regards to their family members. But unfortunately, they haven't been able to reunite. Sometimes the Chinese government just reply that, oh, your family is fine, they're doing well, you can contact them, when in actual fact, that's far from the truth. So it's been very difficult for these families and frustrating that even though they are going through legal means by contacting their, embassies in their respective countries, they haven't really gained enough traction or gained any actionable steps to see real progress, and that has been hindering their efforts. So now they're turning now to the media, people like myself, trusted journalists who they feel they could speak to, because before there was a real reluctance to speak to the media because they had family back home or children in East Turkestan, but they can't really take it anymore, and they feel if they don't speak out, this is never going to end.
Of course. And I wanted to just touch upon maybe some of the different reasons why people are reluctant to speak out. For example, the biggest one might be just that safety aspect and that safety factor that I'm sure might have come up in your conversations with them. If you can please maybe try to describe to us the different ways in which parents might eventually lose contact with their children. And after they do so, why might they be either afraid or intimidated to also reach out and look for them, whether they're contacting government systems or journalists such as yourself? What's been your experience speaking with these families, and why have some of them what are they risking to speak up and look for their family members who are lost? And for those people that might still be afraid, were there any sentiments in that respect that you were able to understand from these families?
Oh, definitely. Yes. I think they're risking their own lives in the fact that they feel that they could be even sent back from the countries they sought refuge in by China, because they're identifying themselves, they're identifying their names, and they're frightened that, China may call for them to be, sent back to China to be reprimanded. And again, they know that when they get there, they'll either be imprisoned or sent to a concentration camp and have no way of ever finding their children. Another factor that many of them have told me is that some are scared to be identified in fear that their children will be more severely punished or mistreated in the camps, or if their family members are arrested, they may be further tortured for speaking out, because we know that many families, Uyghur exiles who are in other foreign countries around the world, like in the West or in Turkey, have actually said that when China comes to know that they're advocating for their loved ones in East Turkestan, they do actually reprimand any existing family members who are still in East Turkestan and give them trouble. So this is the fear. But unfortunately, what's happening is Uyghur families are so desperate to reunite with their children, to reunite with their parents, that this is the only way they see they can do that, by exposing the severity of the situation. And I think that they've just really lost real hope in staying silent, because they always had this initial hope that if they stayed silent and adhered to the Chinese Communist Party's, trying to overshadow any voices coming out, they thought maybe one day the Chinese Communist Party will allow their children to be reunited with them. But because it's been so many years, they know that that's very unlikely it's going to happen, and their mental health is deteriorating on a daily basis. Many of these mothers said that would it take the world, would it take them killing themselves for the world to act? Would it take them, protesting on the streets, which they have been doing now because they just can't take it anymore? And I think they feel very, very let down by certain, Muslim countries who have actually backed China in this crackdown under the guise of extremism, when we know that this crackdown isn't about extremism, it's really about Islamophobia.
Yes. Wow. Well, definitely really hard to hear how a lot of people are quite helpless in this situation. I wanted to conclude with a few final thoughts from you regarding when your article was actually published on the Diplomat's website. If you can talk to us about the public reaction, I'm sure there definitely was one if these people were unable to turn to established legal systems, what the public reaction might have been. And now that these stories are revealed, of course, has there been any hope that the international community would step up and take action for these people?
Well, definitely here in the UK, they declared that China is having a genocide against Uyghurs in East Turkestan, and that was a victory for them. And many politicians in the UK have also shared my investigation and my article exposing these voices to a wider network and really exposing the severity of the situation. I myself want to further work in trying my best to help these Uyghur parents to track down their children, even though it's going to be extremely challenging and probably even hazardous, because I myself have, after publishing that article, received threats to my email, from Chinese Communist Party supporters, which is quite frightening. But I put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I think that we have to always trust Allah, that we're doing the right thing and we're speaking up for the ummah at large, and that we have to help, because even though I'm not in a position of power where I could actually do more, still through the media, it's a platform to highlight underrepresented voices and make a change.
Of course. And I really wanted to thank you for your courage and for your bravery of telling these stories and giving a voice to people who are, of course, essentially voiceless at this time. And we hope that a resolve can be brought soon to the table for their sake and for the sake of all of these Muslim children soon, inshallah. I wanted to thank you so much for your time and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Saleha. Before moving on to our next in-depth analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3.
you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
US President Joe Biden is pledging to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. The target more than doubles the country's prior commitment under the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. How is this administration going to fulfill that promise? To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. President Biden has pledged to reduce U.S. greenhouse emissions by at least 50% by 2030. That's double of the U.S. commitment in the Paris Agreement. Do you think America can keep its promise? And is this promise enough to deal with the challenges of climate? And to discuss with us is Professor Richard Rood, a climate change expert at the University of Michigan. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Professor.
Thank you for asking me.
So do you think is President Biden pledge enough?
It's a very ambitious pledge. It's a start, and I think it will be a very difficult pledge to actually meet. Technologically, it's quite feasible. Politically, logistically, it's very difficult.
So technologically, it is feasible, you're saying. Could you elaborate on that?
So we've known for quite some time through both policy and technology, we can reduce emissions. The easiest way is efficiency. The question would be, if efficiency is something we can do and it's generally no regrets, an easy win, why don't we do it? So technologically, it's quite possible through the use of renewable energy, wind, solar. Some people would put nuclear into the mix. Technologically, it's really quite easy for us to do that.
Why do you think if technology is ready for it, what type of political variables will keep it away from fulfilling that pledge?
So I think they're both political and what I would call power barriers. If you think about the investment in a new power plant, no matter what the source of energy is for that, you're looking to have that power plant be around for a small number of decades. You're looking for a return on that investment. And so there's a lot of built infrastructure. There's a lot of power interests. And when I say power here, I mean like fossil fuel industries that are interested in keeping their businesses going. So there are always constant barriers there. Politically, their representation of, say, coal interests in the United States. But the biggest problem that we have is that the demand for energy is going up. The imperative for that energy demand of improving the quality of life of people all over the world, in many cases bringing them water, the imperative for that gives a certain urgency, and there's a large cost. So it's very difficult to make that shift in behavior, that shift in economics to get us there.
So you think although pledge is good enough, but America may have difficulty to keep its promise?
I do think that it will be difficult for anyone to keep their promise to make reductions and to make the shifts as quickly as have been stated. These international goals that started, nationally declared goals that started really with the Paris Agreement. This is an incredibly difficult problem to do, and under the best circumstances, it will be difficult to muster the policy, to muster the legislation in order to achieve those goals.
So, President has been there now for more than 100 days. Do you see he has passed more executive orders than 3 times more than President Trump or President Obama. Do you see that he is really trying to move as aggressively as he has promised?
I think going into the administration that I have never seen a previous president have thought about climate as much, thought about the policies that are needed, and set goals that are significantly more aggressive than, say, President Obama did. There was a lot of, I would say, damage done to U.S. climate credibility, U.S. climate policy, U.S. practice during the Trump administration. So I think that what President Biden has done has actually been quite remarkable, and it's very assertive, very aggressive, but the challenges he faces are quite large.
Professor, Biden being a politician, is his aggressiveness towards the climate change, is it the result of he's seeing where the public opinion is going? He's seeing that people want these type of changes. That's why he is more aggressive in that area. If that is the case, it means people are already, president is moving forward. Can there, can there be a bigger role for people's movement to get technology ahead of the political consideration?
I do think that people in the United States, both Democrat and Republican, but especially Democrats, are far more interested in addressing climate change than they were 10 years ago. I think, however, that Biden is actually taking an important principled position that is perhaps a bit out in front. Perhaps he's, trying to lead the country in that direction. But I think if you look at his policies, if you look at the aggressive nature of them, they are, again, significantly beyond what was previously attempted. If you look at what Obama did, what he did was often things that were perhaps feasible because they aligned very strongly with markets and with the direction things were going. And what Biden is doing right now is, I think, actually a significant step forward. It represents the important contributions of people like John Kerry, who's been an important advocate of this for quite some time, Gina McCarthy. Again, he has placed within his cabinet, virtually everyone in his cabinet is climate aware and understands how to align or understands the need to align, say, agriculture, transportation, energy, all with climate goals.
Tell me, if people are more aware and President Biden is providing more of a leadership instead of taking what might be acceptable, he's pushing the envelope there. So that sounds good. But can there be an alignment in which climate change activists can force politics and power politics balance in favor of achieving those goals?
Well, that's what one would hope for. You mentioned the executive orders a minute ago, and what we've been doing for the last decade is having competing executive orders going from one administration to the next. So one of the most important things to do now would be to get something that is durable, something that is continuous, and that needs to be done through legislation. So if the activists, if the politicians can move towards that, then I think that would be a very important achievement. One of the challenges, of course, is that the Senate and the House in the United States remain really quite close. And there's a fair amount of evidence in a number of issues that the sentiment of the people is not represented proportionally within our legislative bodies right now.
How do you think it became a partisan issue?
It's been a partisan issue for a long time. You can go back and look in the history, and even in 1995, you can find it in congressional testimony as a partisan issue, where there were even challenges to the whole concept of using climate models and models in general in the development of policy. I think it became a partisan issue because of a lot of lobbying by the oil and gas industry, the fossil fuel industry. It became conflated with conservation activities. And so throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, I think there was actually a very concerted effort to make it political. And, you know, you can look at books like The Merchants of Doubt to see this tactic of making it political, to amplify uncertainty so that it would be difficult for policy to develop and for policy to emerge. So I think that is completely related to something we see in science over and over again, the political nature of it in order to maintain existing power structures.
Where do you see industry comes in? I mean, you being a professor at the University of Michigan, which is a capital of all the fossil fuel consuming vehicles. Is industry moving fast enough to connect with this type of goal which President Biden has set?
So I think industry is an essential part of the solution. If you look at the automobile industry right now, you see a major move towards electric vehicles. Of course, that can have a big change if the way electricity is being generated moves to, say, being more renewable or more generally fossil-free. So I think that there are a number of industries who see the necessity for this, and I think they see that necessity both based on the science, and I think they're seeing the emergence of the public demand for this. In fact, I think industry can move more flexibly and faster than the political system can. The other thing I think industry is looking for is some stability. If you look out and you look at the science, if you look at the global politics and the global nature of industry, then you are in a position where they see the inevitability of needing to address climate change. And I think they would like to see, in many cases, stable policy towards that goal rather than what's happening in the United States, where it vacillates from administration to administration.
Well, that nature of our politics we're not going to change. It will move away from administration to administration, even if it's a legislative change. But what is going forward is you're saying technology is there to meet the President Biden's goal. President Biden is moving based on his goals. And you're saying industry is capable and thinking to move in this direction. How now, let's bring in the other variable, this politics at cities and the state level. How is their realization and understanding of these? Are they adopting the policies which will facilitate achievement of 50% reduction in emission by 2030?
Of course, there's a lot of variability from state to state, city to city, region to region. But in the United States, the regional activities, and especially the mayors in the large cities of the United States, have been really leaders on this. Now, they have the ability to say with their fleets and with their buildings to achieve energy efficiency. But one of the places that the cities have been especially important in leading has been in adaptation. And if I were to say there was a weakness in the way President Biden is approaching this, is that adaptation, which is responding to the consequences of climate change, is a necessary part of what's happening, and that has not been given high enough priority. But if you look at the cities, for example, along the Gulf Coast of the United States and along the East Coast of the United States, they are suffering quite importantly already in terms of sea level rise, erosion, and flooding. And so they have been out front. If you look at interior cities, they've been suffering from the extreme precipitation and the flooding in cities. If you look regionally at agriculture, at flooding, and at drought, the problem with fires, you see that these sectors, these local governors, in the West with respect to fire, you see them really taking the lead on this. And I think that that also pushes the federal government to take a more holistic view of the problem.
President Biden has announced a couple of $1 trillion for infrastructure plan. Do you see in that particular plan things are being taken into consideration of what's going to happen to infrastructure when extreme heat and extreme weather is going to create havoc on bridges and roads and buildings?
So I'm in an engineering school, and in an engineering school, one of the things we talk about is that the solutions to climate change will be implemented through things like infrastructure. If you look at some of our barriers, right now it's the infrastructure of an old power distribution grid. So the steps and the vision that have been outlined in the infrastructure plan, again, are very much focused on addressing the climate problem, as well as addressing a number of problems of economic competitiveness and jobs and employment. It's, this is a shift in time. We are at a time where we need this shift into sort of conscious rebuilding of our energy system and many of the infrastructure assets that we have. We're also going to need new infrastructure, such as, what are we going to be doing at the coasts? What are our plans? How are we, for example, likely to be moving airports away from coastal areas that are flooding?
Well, thank you so much, Professor Richard, for your time. Truly appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking me.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid and Richard. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Keep watching Muslim Network News. For more, visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.
Special thanks to our official supporter, Zagat Foundation of America.